So welcome to the Amplifying Trans and Gender Diverse webinar series. I think this is our 6th session, if I'm not mistaken. We're very excited to bring everyone together to discuss this week's theme that aligns with one of the International Sex Worker Days. So this week we have the pleasure of speaking to trans and gender diverse persons who are sex workers in their countries, but more on that later as our moderator will introduce our panelists today. I'm just here to speak on some house rules. So firstly, please mute your mics when you're not speaking, and also switch off your cameras at all times, because although we want to see everyone's faces, this sometimes lags our ability to converse with each other. Another one is to respect people's pronouns. Don't assume it if you don't remember, or if you're not sure, there's no harm in asking. For example, if you're not sure what my pronoun is, mine is they, them. And if you forget, I don't mind asking. When you go to the bathroom, remember, please mute your mics. We'll see what happens now that everyone's meeting virtually. At the end, there will be a question and answer session. If your internet isn't too great and you can't unmute yourself, don't worry, you can just pop your question into the chat box and we will navigate it from there. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our moderator for today, Sihle Motsa. Hi, Sihle.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Kim. Thank you so much for that welcome. Alrighty, okay. Hi, everyone. So essentially, we were supposed to have 3 panelists. At this point, we only have 1, and that is Aquila from Sweat. So Aquila will just be speaking to us and sharing some of their perspectives around, being a gender diverse sex worker during this climate. And then hopefully our other panelists will be able to join us later. So I'd also just like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for joining us. Given what's going on in the world, it's very important that we were still able to come together and to collectively undermine, a heterosexist, patriarchal society. So I'm very excited that today I will be speaking about sex work, given how in a lot of African societies it's still criminalized, and just like speaking about the challenges that sex workers are being faced with, given the outbreak of corona and the lockdown imposed by a number of governments. So I'll just ask Aquila to speak on their experiences of working as a sex worker during this time. Just running us through rather some of the challenges that they're faced with. Yeah, and then hopefully we'll be able to do the same with the other panelists once they join us. Aquila?
Okay.
Hello, everybody.
Okay. My name is Aquila Gancho. I'm from Cape Town. CBD, like I'm in District 6. I am a sex worker, and I'm also a peer educator at Sweat. I'm doing sex work for a living. So with the corona's issues, it's very difficult for me, and together I'm including police harassing us, stopping us at the road with our job. Being given fines unnecessarily. And that job, my job that I'm doing with sex work, things are very difficult for me to get even clients, because sometimes they are even scared to come to us. So it's very, very difficult for me to continue with my job, because things are different now from what it was before with COVID-19, and now with it affecting us as affecting me as specifically as a sex worker. Things are very slow, so I am in that kind of problem with how I have to do things, and is how I used to do as a sex worker in Cape Town. So that's how I am going through right now at the moment. So Yeah.
Oh,
Sure.
that sounds quite challenging, Aquila, and thank you for
That's
sharing
my,
your
yeah.
your experiences with us. I think it's quite unfortunate, that you've been put under these conditions as a sex worker, and it's
Who's
also
also
quite
even,
unfortunate. Yeah. Yes.
I'm just saying that when a sex worker who's also even homeless, what
Mm.
how we have to face things as sex workers, because I tend to, okay, I tend I tend to even have to go to other places because it looks like it's all the things that I'm usually going through, like with sex working, going to our hotspots. We tend to find them even the same, like it's even harder. It's even harder. So now I even don't know where to go and separate from to and advocacy. Okay. Sure, that's what I'm kind of facing at the moment as a sex worker in Cape Town. It's really, really hard with the police even harassing us and telling us what to do, and telling us that chasing us away from our hot spots as sex workers. So that's what we are facing at the moment.
Okay, once again, thank you so much for sharing that perspective. I think you're highlighting a number of issues that just speak to the precarity of your work. One of them obviously being not able to make ends meet during this time because of the lockdown, and you're raising ideas around homelessness, around increased police harassment. And I just wanted to ask you, are there any responses, or have there been any responses from the governments in the Western Cape, specifically to try assist sex workers during this time?
Oh my God, I can just even say that, okay, we don't get anything from the government. Even people are just making fun of us when they see us on the road, because even the clients, they're even scared to come even closer to us, to be contact with us. So it's very difficult for us to make money. So that's how the government is not doing anything to help with the sex workers. I cannot tell you anything that I can say that, okay, government did this for us sex workers to help us through this time, this difficult time for us. So, and I'm thinking that because maybe that sex workers is still criminalized here in South Africa, so I feel like they feel like we are not existing or anything, that they don't do anything to be exactly.
All right. Yes, I am aware of the fact that Sweat had really requested that government assist during this time, but I think there was some quite poor understanding about how precarious sex work is during this time, and I imagine that it must be way more difficult for you as a gender diverse person having to experience discrimination as well, and I'm wondering, are there any other organizations that are available or that are doing work around the specific challenges that you're highlighting? And because, sorry, before you answer, can I just say that because our other panelists haven't been able to join us, can I just ask that you answer that last question? And then I won't be asking any more questions because I don't want to make this, feel like I'm interrogating you. What I am going to do is just going to speak a bit more about the context of sex work in the country, particularly during this time, and then I'm going to open up to the floor. Is that okay?
Okay, so what you're basically saying, that I should tell you more about what I am facing as a sex worker here in Cape Town. Instead, the Western Cape government took us sex workers to Strandfontein, which was like being in prison. No food, no clean water. Even human rights defenders were not allowed to come give us help.
Oh, right. I had also just asked about the organizations. I know that you're obviously working with Sweat, and Sweat is part of a larger body called the Asijiki Coalition. But the other organizations, have you also been able to or have
to
organizations
something for them.
avail themselves? Yes, because I'm just asking this from our perspective as Iranti and the work that we want to do, and gender dynamics, of course. We're constantly wanting to advance the rights of marginalized persons, and also just thinking if other organizations have been doing, you know, similar work, and if not, how can we bring them on board to ensure that we advance the human rights of sex workers, in particular gender diverse and LGBTQI sex workers.
Okay, Gender Dynamics has assisted by giving us food, and Sweat has also given some of us like food parcels to various places where sex workers operate from, and our human rights. Yeah.
All right. No, I hear you. Thank you so much.
Triangle is also helping with monitoring human rights violations as well.
Yes, most definitely. No, that's absolutely great, but I think there's always an opportunity for more organizations to get on board and to do the important work of protecting.
Yes, that would be much.
Gender-based violence, yeah, and of protecting gender diverse sex workers. Okay, on that note, I think some of the issues that you have highlighted are very important, and they really can form the foundation of our conversation today. One of the things that you highlighted is the idea of increased harassment from law enforcement officials, and I think that goes in tandem with the general discrimination and the violence that sex workers face. I know that.
I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I know that Sweat published a report earlier, which was shared widely, and one of the things that were highlighted there was the fact that sex workers are prone to violence of I think varying types of violence, if I can say that. I'm so sorry. There is something happening in my apartment building. There's some type of construction. So that's where that noise is coming from. But hopefully you'll be able to bear with me. Please do bear with me. So I was just saying one of the things highlighted by that report, you know, it's just like the gratuitous violence that sex workers face, obviously from clients, but also from law enforcement themselves. And even though they were able to give kind of a rough statistic, you know, just of the killing of sex workers and how more than half of those are considered to be from murder. One of the things that was noted about that report was that they weren't able to disaggregate the stats. So they're not able to give a breakdown.
Can you please repeat that, because I couldn't hear that?
Oh, sorry, I'm just speaking about how the report highlighted the killing of sex workers. Yes, it highlighted the killing of sex workers and how more than half of those are murdered, right? But also what was lacking from that report is that it didn't provide disaggregated stats. So it didn't provide a breakdown as to the gender and the sexual orientation of, you know, the sex workers affected.
It did.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm sure.
So I'll just have a look. I'll have another look around. I'll have a look at that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. So, but I think still there were just some very disappointing stats, if I can say that, in that a lot of those murders went unresolved. So I think the task for us as activists and human rights defenders is to just collectively strategize about the ways in which we obviously use that type of documentation process to advocate for reforms, you know, to really think about the ways in which police enforcement treats sex workers and how they can be brought to justice. I think globally we're being faced with the ways in which police, you know, abuse the power afforded to them. And I think it's coming to light the ways in which the police themselves need to be held accountable, for the ways they treat particular members of society. And I know that that's particularly the case with sex workers. And what makes it even more difficult to address the human rights violations committed by police officers is this idea of sex work being considered a criminal activity in South Africa. So I think that there's a lot of work to be done with that regard. And obviously it would be very important for organizations like Gender Dynamics and Iranti and Sweat to come together to push that mandate forward of holding the police to account. So just on that note, maybe you can share some of your experiences, even though you have briefly spoken about your experiences with the police. Could you maybe just like speak a bit more about, do you have any way of reporting, or what are the mechanisms you do that you usually, utilize when faced with harassment from the police?
Sweat's helpline, where I can usually report some of the cases that I go through, like being forced to do certain things by police telling me to undress when they want to search me, while I'm being done that by a male police, and asking them to say that I want to be searched by a female police officer, and would force me and sometimes want me to undress so that they can search me, and they would do that in public places, and give me fines which are not even specifically said of what I did. Like I'm going to Sweat. Like sometimes I would go to Sweat's clinic, legal clinic, where I tell the things that I face. But yeah, they can they also help me. I've received some help from them as a sex worker. With the paralegals arranging everything.
But like I was saying earlier, I think it's important for us as a society to strengthen the work that sex workers do in South Africa, particularly in terms of gaining decrim. And I know earlier the president did refer, very vaguely about decriminalizing sex work, but obviously with no definite time deadlines. So just thinking of this idea of decriminalization, I just like to open to the floor and give us an opportunity to collectively strategize about how we can push forward this agenda of decriminalization, given that it's very important for us to finally consider sex work as legitimate work, because without doing so, we really can't advocate for, some of the rights, some of the labor laws that workers across the world have. So could I just open to the floor at this moment to share some comments, to pose any questions to myself and to Aquila, who has spoken so bravely about their experiences, and for us to collectively think about decrim, particularly within the context of a lockdown and a global pandemic. So for that, what you can do is that I'm looking for a raise hand function. I'm not seeing one, but I think you can just press on the chat tab and indicate that you would like to pose a question, and then I will allow you to speak by unmuting your mic. So if you have any questions, just indicate by entering the chat. Oh yes, so I have a question from Kim. I'm not going to read the question out. I'm going to allow Kim to pose the question themselves. Kim, the floor is yours.
Hi, I just want to say there is a raised hand, someone called Sam, Political Achiever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so is there anyone else? Okay, so can I allow Sam to pose their question, and then I'll allow for Kim to pose their question?
Perfect.
Yes, we're giving precedent to our guests. or giving priority, sorry, to our guest.
Okay. First of all, it's not necessarily a question, but it comes more in the form of a comment. So, firstly, also as a participant, I would like to maybe take some responsibility as well in the fact that I would have loved to have more of our more sex worker participation within this particular call. And here's where I say I also take personal I also take I take the blame for that, because also the issue of digital skills comes up once again in relation to opening up spaces for sex workers to be able to then fully be representative of exactly what it is that they are experiencing on the ground. So our siblings who are in sex work go through so many experiences. Then we generally, this is just one day in which we are acknowledging to speak out on that, out of the many days in which we constantly talk about the different issues of advocacy that we have. But like right now, even currently within our setting, sex workers, and in particular trans sex workers, are going through the most in this time. Whereas where you're finding, especially in criminalized contexts, including South Africa itself, you'll find that in criminalized contexts, there is no structure set up for those very basic protections, and many people are finding themselves at the mercy of persons who then instead of assisting them through this, including those very people that should be assisting, then taking advantage of the situation. So generally, I think we really need to do more to open up the platforms for them to be able to engage. And also, you'll find that with many sex workers, they are currently being treated under programs, especially trans women sex workers are being treated under programs that are delivering services for MSM. So there's various layers of the silencing that's happening. And I really would like us to take it upon ourselves to take it a step further in terms of opening up more meaningful engagement for them.
Thank you so much, Sam. I think you've raised quite a few important points. I am going to come back to you to question you about the context in Zimbabwe. But before I do that, can I just hand over to Kim, who also had a question?
Yeah, hi Aquila. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with us so openly. I had a question about, you mentioned that the Western Cape government placed homeless persons in Strandfontein, where a lot of resources were stripped from you, like healthcare that you normally might would have had access to, and freedom of movement and all of those types of things. And I didn't really get an engagement on that front. I just wanted to know what was the process of government forcing something like this, and yeah, what is happening there now? Were people able to leave? I was just hoping that you could maybe elaborate on what is the current situation in the Western Cape in terms of how people were forcefully removed and taken to Strandfontein.
Aquila?
Yes. I'm going to talk about my experience in Strandfontein. The government told us that they are going to provide with everything that I said before, like giving us food, health issues if we have got ones, and they would even test us at the destination where we went to. And that never happened. And instead, they mixed us with other genders, and it was so difficult for us to communicate. And some people got raped. And people were not in healthy positions, and they wouldn't allow human defenders to come in and intervene with our situations that we are facing as homeless people and as trans sex workers mixed with different varieties of other genders. And it was so difficult for us as sex workers who are transgender, homeless.
Yeah.
I think what you're bringing to the light is just like how marginalized persons, are almost persecuted for being marginalized, how they are put in even worse situations because of, either their work or their sexual orientation, or even the nexus of that line of employment and their sexual orientation. And it's really just distressing to hear you speak about how even the government itself is being implicated in violating LGBTQI sex workers. But I also just want to go back to a point made by Sam. I think you really provided insight on the context in Zimbabwe, more especially how I think the framing around MSM makes it particularly difficult for advocacy to take place around, gender diverse sex workers. So could I ask that you just speak a bit more about the ways in which as organizations we can provide assistance during this time, especially given the severe repression that activists and human rights defenders face in a very conservative Zimbabwe.
Okay, I think generally that's quite a difficult one, but just looking at our context, right from the onset, we already had a minister called Nick Mangwana speaking of sex workers as possible vectors of transmission of COVID. Already that was the framing before any of the just in our neighboring Zambia. They were even able to do contact tracing as a result of the role that they gave for sex workers to be able to assist in that response. So I think first and foremost, especially in terms of framing, also because many of us, especially the criminalized context, we rely heavily on the health discourse around KP, around the work around KPs. So in there also, the framing itself, we need to be more stern in how we demand of healthcare for trans persons is not then mixed with programming, MSM or other programming that does not relate to the lived experience of a person. I think first and foremost, that's really important. Then in terms of like issues like I've been especially for me, the issue around the digital divide is coming out as a very big one, because also in terms of access to information or access to spaces, even to have voice heard, small ways in which we can then be able to roll out some of these skills can go a long way in terms of visibilizing some of the experiences and the needs that various groups of people the various groups of people have, and in particular with sex workers, because in as much also with the digital aspects, this can open up a much more diverse ways of working, and besides diverse ways of working, also the information aspect, it's also important, and networking. And one other element that we don't really speak too much when we speak of work with sex workers is around mental health and wellness. So the aspect of that support, I think, is crucial and key because of the very many traumatic experiences that many are faced with on a day-to-day basis. It's really important to have that support for the psyche of an individual, especially in an environment where you're being dehumanized for various aspects of yourself, including your work status. So this is just some of, but there's various elements that are also involved, and the needs are varied. But these are some of the ways in which I think we can be able to assist.
Thank you so much, Sam, for providing some much needed perspective. I'm now going to allow Romana, who has indicated that they have a question. Romana, you can go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Sihle, and thank you everyone who's spoken. I think this is a very interesting and important discussion to have. I think one of the questions I have, or the question I have is, what are the what are the needs of sex workers right now, considering where we are in the country with COVID, sort of affecting every way in which sex workers work.
Aquila, can I allow you to respond to this one? I have some thoughts, but I don't want to speak on behalf of sex workers, so I'll allow you to take.
Okay, I can start with the basic ones. It's mostly food that we struggling to get, clothes, toiletries, sanitary towels for and blankets and clean water, and what else did I say? Did I say sanitizers? Sanitizer gels, and yeah, that's basically what we are desperately looking for as sex workers. And homeless, and this is,
yes,
then homeless,
okay.
yeah.
Great. Thank you, Aquila. Thank you so much. I think it's very important to be open and to speak about, to speak bravely about your experiences, as an activist and a human rights defender. I think that's really going to assist us in taking the agenda forward. So I do know that a couple of organizations, including Iranti, have put together, or are in the process of putting together, resources to try and assist as best as possible. So post this meeting, we'll definitely be doing that with you. But you've definitely highlighted a number of key issues, obviously some of them being more immediate than others. And I think what's coming up at this point is providing sex workers with, relief during this time around COVID. So obviously just the basics, as Aquila has mentioned. But I think beyond that, it's going to be very important for organizations to take the decrim agenda more seriously and to push it more robustly. I think this has been a great conversation, but it's also important for us to start strategizing around how we consistently assist sex workers during this time. And I know that Iran is part of the RCGK coalition. A lot of other organizations are part of that very coalition. So given the president's very vague mentioning of decriminalization, I personally think that that's an opportunity for us to push that agenda, just like use that very kind of tentative mentioning to still hold him to account in relation to the government affording sex workers human rights. Given that we also weren't able to have our other panelists join us, a lot of them mentioned that they were experiencing connectivity issues. Someone else wasn't able to make it for personal reasons. If there aren't any questions, I think we'll be closing
There's
earlier
a
than I
question from Whitney Boyson.
anticipated. Okay, so before we close, I'm just going to give Whitney Boyson the floor. Whitney?
Hi everyone. I was now listening in, and I just have a question. I don't think it's specifically to Aquila or to Sweet at large. I just want to know in this time of COVID and what Aquila highlighted what they went through. And my specific concern is about that they are homeless. And I have read about, because I'm from the Western Cape, and I have read about the human rights violations that happens in Strandfontein, or the camp that the government put up there for people to stay in. So my question is, and maybe the people from Cape Town can answer this, and not Aquila specific or Sweet specific, is there no other shelter currently in this time where we can put specifically our trans and gender diverse people to put them into for sheltering that we know of? I am very far from Cape Town, like 4 to 5 hours drive. Yeah, so I just want to know in Cape Town area, is there no other shelters where we can try to put our people in?
Does anyone from the floor have an answer to Whitney's question?
Hi, Whitney. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Kanisila here from Gender Dynamics. I have reached out regarding shelters that could be a possibility for sisters and the trans community to be housed in. The problem with the shelters currently that I know of, because I've spoken to Hassan Khan, who's the CEO of the Haven shelters, is either that the shelters are extremely full. Secondly, it could also mean that the sisters are, or the community that was housed in Strandfontein needed to use the channel that they had. Because remember when they left or when they were asked to leave, according to the city council, they had a process of leaving and letting people go. But this is something that is still very much, we don't know how true this is, because according to the community, the sisters, we believe that they were just taken from Strandfontein and went to be dropped where they were taken from. So under various bridges in the city where they live now, where they lived before they were taken to Strandfontein. But according to the mayor that I've spoken to, according to Mr. Hassan Khan, who's worked closely with the Strandfontein homeless group, he advised that they were supposed to go through a process with social workers, where the social worker and the team that was assigned were supposed to assign them to different shelters. Now, this is something that we are still investigating as to what is happening, because we were also invited to be part of a Section 11 committee. However, the committee just never came forward with any information. So everything that happened at the Strandfontein camp is what we've seen in the news, and obviously first-hand accounts of the community that we work with. But further than that, we don't have much information with regards to what is happening when it comes to shelter. They claim that shelters are full. They claim that they cannot assist certain individuals who are abusing or using substances, and if those individuals are admitted to a shelter, they will have to submit to regular drug testing. They will have to be part of the activities that they have at the shelter, and so on and so forth. I know Pride is full. I for sure I can say that, because I've spoken to Maimuna, which is our the social worker at Pride Shelter. The shelter and in the Pride Shelter is full. The Haven shelters are, according to Mr. Hassan Khan, they were filled to capacity, and this was some time ago that I've spoken to him. So they also claim, Whitney, that they are not a place to be for housing. He says, according to Mr. Hassan Khan, that they are not a place for housing. They are called transition centers. So basically, someone that will stay in the center or in the shelter for a period of, let's say, 2 to 3 months, and in that period, they need to make plans to leave and go somewhere else.
Thank you very much, Pensilia, for providing more context with regards to the Strandfontein and the conversations around housing, especially for gender diverse persons. I know for us here at Iranti, we've also been facing similar challenges. Our director, Jabu Pereira, has been in constant communication with the government, and we really haven't received a positive response. We're being told that such housing would only be available, you know, within a few months or even years, really. And just like
Definitely.
considering the maladministration and how slow change tends to happen, especially with regards to gender diverse persons, yeah, it's not really looking promising. I think for us, it's going to be just important to continue doing the work that we have been doing. We've been thinking around a number of models to provide housing for LGBTQI persons during this time and to really assist where we can. So I think it's going to be pertinent for us as organizations to come together and to kind of, you know, work through our existing networks to see where we can fill in the gaps created and sustained by government. Yeah, and
Sihle, thank you for that. And I just to interject there, sorry.
yeah.
We at Gender Dynamics are definitely, we know that the community is important to us, and especially the transgender community and the gender non-conforming persons that are housed in Strandfontein. And we know that there are quite a number of human rights violations, so we note that. However, during this crazy tumultuous time, we understand that there was no processes of reporting those. But we also encourage the community to keep onto those stories, to keep onto evidence they have, and to give us a time and when they can talk about it, to actually talk about it. We also provide psychological assistance. So anyone that needs counseling, we do try to assist in that aspect. And then we are busy with an emergency shelter project as well for the sisters, specifically the trans community, the sistershood that we're assisting. And Aquila will know this. So although they might not be aware, but we are currently busy, hard working on this proposal, and it's in its final stages. So hopefully, if not by this week, hopefully by next week, we could give our sisters a better response as to how we as Gender Dynamics can also assist.
Yes, most definitely. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Most definitely, I think you're quite you're quite right, you know, and we will obviously be continuing. Oh yes, now I've remembered. Someone did mention to me that one of the panelists was supposed to join us, that they feel that it's very important for us to create some type of resource based on these conversations. And I think what you're speaking to really does illuminate how we can use these types of conversation, you know, in the future to kind of catalog some of the experiences that as an LGBTQI community we've faced, and some of the challenges that gender diverse and trans sex workers have faced during this period, you know, to further advance our cause. So I'll definitely be keeping my eye on that one. And then before we close,
sorry, just lastly, I just want to interject again and say that remember that this is the very first time that we undergo an emergency lockdown, for example, a pandemic of this kind. And so in this instance, everything that us as our organizations have learned and kind of experienced, I think keeping that as information that we could use in the future if something like this should happen again. Because
Yes.
we can never say that this won't happen again. In that way, we can also be sure of how to assist the most marginalized optimally when something like this hit us. We know that at this time it hit us it caught us very off guard. And so in that sense, I believe that if we use all this information, if we use these models that we're trying to put in place and see if it's going to work, even the online conversations, using online platforms more often and strengthen those models in our organizations, I believe that when something like this happens again, then we will be way ahead of other organizations who hasn't, necessarily learned from these experiences.
Yes, most definitely, you're quite right. And I think it's very important for us to not necessarily envision another event of the sort, but just to be prepared. Yeah, just to be prepared for
definitely
anything. Yeah.
For the unknown, we never know what could
Most
happen.
definitely, yeah. And it may not come in the form of a lockdown or a global
Yes.
pandemic. It may be anything else that just kind of changes the working, the ways in which organizations are working or society at that moment. So at this moment, I just want to thank everyone once again who joined us for this conversation. I think it's very important for us to continue these conversations, and we will be having more of these conversations, hopefully with more voices from sex workers themselves, as suggested by Sam. But before we close off, I just wanted to take a moment of silence for another sex worker who's been brutally murdered, and this time in the hands of the police. And this goes back to the idea of increased harassment from the police that I spoke about earlier. Their name is Robin Manzumi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Yeah, I think it's very important for us to mourn each other, to hold space for each other, and to fight for each other. All right. Thank you to everyone once again. Please join us in our next session, which will be happening in the next 2 weeks. We're very grateful that you've joined us, in this one and in previous ones, and we hope that you'll be taking the conversation forward, outside of this platform. Thank you.
Thanks, Hitle. Well done.
Thank you, Jabu. Thank you. Thank you, Aquila, yes, for taking the time. Almost forgot one of the most important people. Yes, thank you for taking the time. Aquila,
okay.
I will be speaking after this meeting. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about how I am facing, and to tell people who I am definitely sure that they are going to take step further to what us as sex workers are facing on the ground. So I'd love to thank you very much to Iranti and Gender Dynamics and Sweat as well for trying it out for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.